welcome to episode 155 of the NFL Scotland podcast. Pre-season week 1 is done. You can overreact, you can panic, you can do what you want, but tonight we're talking quarterbacks. My name is Cameron Hobbs.
And my name is Paul Mitchell. Quarterbacks, my favourite subject of them all. We might even mention Hard Knocks, which was a bit meh, I felt, plus anything else that takes our fancy. All of these in the company of Charles Patterson.
Good evening, Charles.
Good evening. Delighted to see that Jordan Love is worth the hype.
Isn't he just? Now, we'll get into that in just a minute. But before we do that, we were supposed to be joined by a fourth person. To talk quarterbacks, we were going to be joined by Jim Ballard, of course, former Scottish Claymore, member of the NFL Scotland podcast team, but we couldn't get him. So instead, we've got someone that Paul loves to barter with, someone who he can negotiate. Please welcome, it's Gordon McGuinness.
How's it going?
Oh, no.
That wasn't in my contract. I'm only supposed to appear with him once a month.
Yep, nobody knew Gordon was joining apart from me, Charles, and Paul thought they had the night off tonight, but nope, he's here to noise them up as much as he can and keep them right. So, sit back and listen to 90 minutes of why Jameis Winston is better than Taysom Hill. It all starts now.
You bring him on when the Ravens have beaten the Saints in pre-season. Of course, nobody beats the Ravens in the pre-season because they go crazy. They open up their passing game. They just go nuts. It's fantastic. They're a great team to watch in the pre-season. I would not like to watch any other team in the pre-season than the Baltimore Ravens. They're a real favourite of mine, so I'm delighted Gordon's here.
I'm weirdly attached to this pre-season winning streak as well. Like, I think if they get to 20, then I kind of won't care until they get close to 30, and then I'll really care. But like, it's like it's a really bizarre streak because pre-season is entirely random. Like, in fact, I've not done this yet. I want to work out. So pre-season odds are basically even money, a little bit less, I think. I wonder if you'd put £10 on the Ravens to win 18 pre-season games ago and just kept putting the winnings on time over time. Like 18 evens in a row is a pretty decent sum of money for a tenner, I think.
Especially if you kept taking your winnings and adding that onto the next one.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, just rolling it over.
18, starting with a tenner. I think you'd be over £1 million by now.
Let's have a look.
Just
check this.
So, right, we've now distracted Gordon while he goes and does some sums in the background.
I can multitask, don't worry.
Yeah. But what we're doing is, this came out of a conversation we were having last time, Paul, where we started talking about wide receiver duels and things like that. We'd started to talk about who was in a bad place when it came to quarterback depth, but also who's maybe in a good place. And now that we've had week 1 of the pre-season done, this is where the overreaction comes. This is where, this guy's going to totally challenge for this because he's slung for 2 touchdowns against the fourth stringers. But this is the conversation that we're going to kick off tonight. And really what we want to do here is look at some of the teams where we think the greatest areas of concern are what's the biggest drop-off after QB1, and then who are the teams that are actually set up to have a little bit of a battle, and potentially who are some of the quarterback 2s that might become quarterback 1s sooner rather than later.
Well, I know one quarterback that I very much think of as a 2, but we'll come back to that later. I think the other driving force behind this was, of course, Cameron, the early season problems with the Colts and the Cowboys. Carson Wentz appears to have made a miracle recovery. So too does Dak Prescott, and then has been thrown back a little bit as well, because we were already talking about how the Colts and the Cowboys could be affected if neither of these gentlemen were to take the field. So I think that's the best place to start. And if we look at the problems that the Cowboys are having, which if you looked at Hard Knocks, Dak has been seen by specialists in the Yankees and the Astros because there's something wrong with the throwing mechanics in his shoulder. I don't think that's a particularly good way to be going into your season. I think that is causing a lot of unease. And one of the biggest tropes that we get during pre-season is when people come out and say, don't worry, they'll be fine. Don't worry about it. They'll be fine. I'm not really sure they will be fine. So I would worry for both Dallas and for Indianapolis if neither of those guys can take the field. I mean, is it Cooper Rush that it's the guy that's behind Dak Prescott? I mean, I'd never even heard of Cooper Rush till I Googled him.
So Cooper
Well, you
Rush.
saw how badly Dallas fell off a cliff when he was injured last year, but then that was when they had Andy Dalton, who could probably start for a team in the NFL at a push, and may well start for considerable length of time with the Bears. You've got to. I think there's an old saying that the second most important person in your franchise is your backup quarterback. Now, I'm not entirely sure that that's absolutely accurate, but if Dallas want to do absolutely anything at all, they've got to find a better solution than what they've got right now.
And if we look at the setup, so let's talk about Dallas first of all. So, Cooper Rush is ranked currently 4th in the unofficial depth chart. So I think, QB2 there is Garrett Gilbert. If you take Garrett Gilbert as an option, now, obviously went and played most of his games really at the Orlando Apollos, was one of the better teams in the AAF, the Alliance of America Football League or whatever it was. Obviously beyond that, he spent time with the Cleveland Browns, but as of 2020, as a 30-year-old quarterback, he's had 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 283 yards passing, with a 52% completion rate in the NFL. He is not experienced. He's not spent a lot of time there. And like you say, this is not a lot of depth. We didn't see anything great out of the Cowboys last season when Dak went off a cliff, and this is kind of already starting to talk into this Hard Knocks piece. But yeah, there's got to be worries about Dak's health and fitness, the ankle, the shoulder, even the rustiness, the fact that he's not played since October last year. There's a lot to overcome there. And I guess, if you're looking around the league, is there a worse quarterback room for depth than the Dallas Cowboys?
Well, you could argue the Jets on that one potentially. I don't think they've got. Is it James Morgan could be the potential backup, or the Titans? I was looking Logan Woodside. We've all heard of Logan Woodside, of course. A 7th round pick of the Bengals is projected to be either 2 or 3 there. So there are some places that you certainly do worry. I mean
Houston has to be the worst quarterback room, and they've got Deshaun Watson running with the 4th string safeties.
Hey.
Yeah. It's a valid one. So Texas sucks if you're a quarterback. Or if you're a quarterback in Texas, you suck, pretty much.
What about Pittsburgh? And I know Gordon loves digging into Pittsburgh. There's not one quarterback in there that you would trust at all.
So I'm going to shock everyone here with a compliment for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Well, it's kind of a backhanded compliment. It wouldn't shock me if, not through injury, one of those 2 guys starts at least a game this year. Roethlisberger looked like his arm was gone towards the end of last year. They haven't really shown any proper drive for a succession plan. And I don't think Mason Rudolph is terrible. I mean, he's not a good fighter, but and Dwayne Haskins, for as much as he hasn't proved anything in the NFL, was a 1st round pick. It wasn't that long ago. Like there was talent there, and they are a good organization. Like I think there's. I mean, if you compared them to other, like both of those guys, Rudolph and Haskins, there's probably numerous teams who would be okay with them as their backups. I think you would take either of those as the backup in Dallas, for example.
I love the fact that the Steelers have rolled the dice on Haskins purely because it's the most un-Steelers-like thing to do. You would never expect them to take a risk on someone who's clearly a liability off the field and has not proved to be any good on the field really thus far. But as you said, he is a 1st round pick, so there's clearly some talent there. It's the succession planning thing. Mason Rudolph is not going to be the long-term successor to Roethlisberger. There's no way he's proved that he's anything other than a permanent backup, if not someone who you can call off the free agent list in the future. And Dobbs came in towards the end of last season as well, and he didn't set the head on fire either. These are not guys that you can rely on to take your team into the playoffs. But I love the fact that they've rolled the dice on Haskins. It's almost as if they're getting desperate.
Well, they are getting desperate. I think they are getting desperate. I mean, you look at it, Mason Rudolph, you said it, he's not a fighter, he's a lover, not a fighter. Dwayne Haskins, well, Mrs. Dwayne Haskins is a fighter, not a lover, apparently. So that's the other way around. I think Charles is right. He's worth a punt because you never know what you might get out of them. And I think Gordon's right. I think they've actually got one of the better rooms. If, Big Ben goes out, for a week or two, then they don't go down the pan. I mean, I think, they've got... Mason Rudolph is nobody's answer to anything. Nobody's going to be trading for him and trying to come and get him. But,
ironically,
a week or two.
Ironically, worth a punt was what the Steelers' offense was referred to in the second half of last year.
God, now even I'm regretting asking him. Dwayne Haskins, to be fair to him as well, I thought he outperformed Mason Rudolph in preseason game 1. Now, again, Rudolph started, so it was against the ones. Fine, don't read too much into it. But Mason Rudolph, for a start, seems to think that all of his receivers are at least 8'6". Spends, most of his receivers are doing some kind of combination of the YMCA dance to try and go and get the ball because it's just all over the place. Whereas Dwayne Haskins looked a little bit nervy at first, but kind of got into the game and settled into it and actually looked decent. I think that you've got more upside with Haskins, definitely, like you guys have been saying. He was clearly talented. He went into Washington. That was a tough spot for him to land. That franchise has been going through an awful lot of stuff as well. Mike Tomlin's the sort of person you want to take a quarterback like that and try and get him sorted out. So it's a good possible spot.
Cameron, nobody forced them to go to a strip club during a pandemic. I mean, it's all about judgment and becoming the future face of the franchise and all this kind of thing. I mean, that was not his finest hour. I think we can all agree on that. And that's why I'm surprised they did take a chance on him. I didn't particularly see that coming. But it depends whether you're going on character or talent. And I think there's enough talent in there. I think one of the teams, I've mentioned it already, that will struggle is potentially Tennessee, who are slated to win their division as it stands with Ryan Tannehill. But at the moment, they've got, I mentioned, Logan Woodside and Matt Barkley as the two backup quarterbacks. Now, Logan Woodside, to be fair to him, I don't think has actually started a game yet, but you're then looking at an unknown coming in. And as you know, these things can go one of two ways. They can either be spectacularly brilliant or they can be like that. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Somebody will remember it, who was thrown in for the Buffalo Bills and got flushed again within a quarter or two for having thrown about 16 interceptions.
Oh, Nathan Peterman.
Yeah. So, it can go, one of two ways. Woodside as well. I mean, he had a DUI prior to minicamp back in 2018, but he's hung around there. They see something in him because he's been there for a few seasons, but who knows?
I think the Chargers have got a bit of a problem if Herbert goes down because Chase Daniel is their backup. And having seen him at Wembley with the Bears, he is the absolute anti-Justin Herbert. He can't throw beyond the 10-yard line if he's standing on his own goal line. I mean, he's not going to generate anything. What you can't have is a drop-off. That's the big thing. You're obviously going to get a drop-off in some shape or form, but you can't have this chasm from one to two. It's just not feasible, and that's why it's so easy for players to get injured nowadays. You would think that there would be enough nous in each organization to think, actually, we need to nail this position. And then there's a couple of you look at the Raiders, for example. They've got Mariota as their backup. He's arguably the best backup out there who could probably start. And that kudos to Gruden for going and getting him last year. And you do wonder why they don't think about these things a bit more.
So let's stick to the bad side of this, because we will come on to the good side. I want us to pick the top 3 worst quarterback situations in the NFL going into this season. And I think I'm going to go in and say the Cowboys is in there for definite. Does anyone disagree with that?
We're looking at backups.
We're looking at depth outside the top one. Okay. So it's overall depth at the quarterback position.
Are we going to exclude the Texans from this conversation because it's just not fair?
No. they didn't have to go and get who they went and got. So
Well,
no, but I don't. I think there's worse than the Texans. So I'm not sure they're bottom three. But the Cowboys is definitely in that bottom three because just after Dak Prescott, it falls off a cliff, and there is nobody there at all. The other ones that we talked about there were the Jets. The only one is Josh Johnson, who's has shown some flashes of capability. Potentially, he's currently ranked in at number 4 on the depth chart. He's not a young man, but you look at his. Well, it's eight touchdowns to 14 interceptions, 1,632 passing yards, with a passer rating of 61.7. Fine, do you know what? He's not exactly done anything brilliant in his career, but he's been around a lot of places. So maybe the Jets are the other one. Who else though?
Well, I mean, Gordon's here with his preseason haircut, which I really like, by the way. Trace McSorley at the Ravens, is he an answer?
So he's not going to be the back. I think he's got a back injury that's going to keep him out for preseason. Tyler Huntley's going to be the backup, and the Ravens are like a weird situation in that if you have a good athlete at quarterback, I think they would probably be somewhat passable. I think Tyler Huntley probably keeps them, if he had to start a full season, somewhere in like the 6 to 9 win range, just because of the style of offense they run. Okay. Who I would have in amongst some of the worst? Tampa Bay. Like if Brady goes down, that's Kyle Trask is their kind of potential future plan, but
he didn't do very well in the week.
Blaine Gabbert, Ryan Griffin. That's not a good quarterback room. The Seahawks, if Russell Wilson goes down, not great.
Do the Seahawks not have Geno Smith? Is that why it's not great?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
He's been there for a while.
I just want to name names,
do you know what? It's funny. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers is definitely, Blaine Gabbert and Ryan Griffin and Kyle Trask is pretty poor. The only thing you could maybe hope is that Trask could come through behind a decent offensive line. He obviously wasn't playing behind one at the weekend, but I mean his numbers were absolutely honking. At least
they have a rookie though that they can work with.
Yeah.
You look at, not that they're going to compete in any way, shape, or form. You look at the Lions. You got Jared Goff, and then you've got Tim Boyle, who was the backup for Rodgers in Green Bay, and now has become essentially the number 2 there. And then you got David Blau, who I think he took a few snaps last year or the year before.
Yeah, he played Thanksgiving, did he?
That team is essentially, what's the point? Yeah. I know I'm bashing the Lions again, but what is the point in not having a backup there that can actually maybe challenge Jared Goff?
Atlanta are pretty poor as well. Atlanta, you're looking at Felipe Franks and AJ McCarron.
Oh, jeez.
It's not great.
The one other name I'm going to chuck in here is the Kansas City Chiefs, because outside of Mahomes, you've got Chad Henne.
But look what he did in the playoffs.
I know. But that aside, like, and do you know what? For that, because he did show he's capable, I'll immediately withdraw. I'll withdraw the Chiefs from that. The Titans definitely in that conversation. Then the Lions, Tampa Bay, the Jets. We can't ignore the Texans. I think that the only thing that you could say there is that Tyrod Taylor and Deshaun Watson in the same quarterback room, whether or not Watson's going to play, he's still there and he's still on the chart. So therefore, fine. They managed to survive that one. The Bengals, Brandon Allen probably did just about enough to be passable. But beyond that, Kyle Shermer and Eric Dungey, it's not particularly reassuring. So, okay, right, we need to commit to this. What about John Walford as well? Did he show glimpses that make the Rams?
He was okay. He wasn't terrible in the playoffs, was he? Am I imagining that? Like, he wasn't good, but he also wasn't.
He didn't throw the game away, I don't think. Yeah.
He didn't have much competition with Goff, let's be honest.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so it's 2 off: the Jets, the Bucks, the Lions, the Titans, the Texans, and the Seahawks. Who's joining the Cowboys in that bottom 3 situation?
Well, I'm going Lions and Titans. I think they're struggling. I think you can't put the Texans in there until we know. I know Gordon's right. I think he's currently training with the Houston Astros at the moment. They want him nowhere near the Texans, but Deshaun is still there in that quarterback room. And if by some miracle he is allowed to play, they're a contender. So I don't think we can go there.
And also if Watson starts, then Tyrod Taylor's the backup, and he's more than passable as a backup at that point. So like that kind of improves things. I agree. I agree on Detroit. I would have them in the bottom three.
Detroit are bad, but I think that there's a disclaimer there. Detroit are not going to. They're not going to contend. I think we should be talking about teams that, if their number one goes down, suddenly their hopes blow up. Detroit
Tampa Bay then
close to contending.
Tampa Bay and the Titans. Yeah, Tampa Bay and the Titans. You're looking at.
Okay. I can get on board with that. Okay. Decided. The worst three quarterback situations outside QB1 in the NFL this season are the Dallas Cowboys, the Tennessee Titans, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Ooh. There you go. Let's hope nothing happens to Messrs. Prescott, Brady, or Tannehill. Okay, fine. On to the best situation then. Which quarterback room has got the most potential to just keep balling no matter what happens?
Well, I think there's two categories here. I think one category is who's in a position to displace the probable starter.
Yeah.
So you could go with quarterback controversy.
So that's the third category. I think best overall situation, and then most top three quarterback controversies waiting to happen.
Okay, I mean, in terms of somebody clearly backing up, well, is Case Keenum good enough to back up at the Browns? Can he come in and win you a game or two? He's got experience. You've got to think that he'd be able to do something. He's got experience. He knows how to play the game. He does know how to win, and therefore, so if we're talking about if somebody goes out for 2 or 3 weeks, I think he's more than capable of shoving in a few starts. My own favourite, I think Charles mentioned Marcus Mariota. I'd take Mariota in New Orleans as a starter right now. Simple as that. I think he's more than good enough to start. I've seen some talk of, well, isn't Jordan Love the ideal candidate? But I think he's not going to displace Rodgers, but we don't know if he can actually play. We do not know that yet. And you don't know that until they actually play an NFL game, not preseason, whether they actually play a game. So Mariota, to me, is probably putting the Raiders in a really good place.
I'm gonna second your Cleveland shout for a couple of reasons. One, I think Case Keenum is good enough to win you a couple of games. He's done it in the past. Two, that offense is very quarterback friendly with the amount of play action they run, and Stefanski is very good at scheming things open. And three, I think it goes beyond Case Keenum. Kyle Lauletta looked pretty decent the other night. Yeah. He's only thrown 5 regular season passes, and he was bad in the regular season for the Giants, but it's pretty good preseason in 2019. Was really good in college, admittedly at a lower level in the FCS. Like that, for number 3 situations, that's really not bad. It's hard to see past the Raiders at 1, though, just because Mario is almost, should be starting quarterback. Maybe Chicago, like if Dalton's the backup there, if not, it's Justin Fields. It pains me to say it, but I thought Jordan Love actually looked pretty good the other night. So maybe the Packers have actually got a pretty good backup situation there. I mean, I wouldn't spend the first round picking a backup quarterback.
Gordon giveth and Gordon taketh away. Charles, what did you make from your quarterback's performance in the preseason?
I think he did exactly what everyone expected him to do. He's clearly a talented player, and he wasn't. I think it would be unfair to suggest that he was going to go in and chuck the ball around and throw for through 200 or 300 yards. He was obviously going to be under a bit of pressure because there's been so much focus on him ever since he was picked. So he did exactly what he needed to do. He took a bit of a hit and went out, which was unfortunate. I think he'll probably end up playing again before the end of the month. And if he produces the same thing that he does again, then ultimately, if the situation arises that he has to come in and take snaps, I think he's probably proved in that short window that he could be at least relied upon not to become a turnover machine. There was a lot of short passes. There was nothing particularly sparkly. There was a nice one over the middle of the field to Sternberger, which was, I think, a 30 or 40 yard completion. He's clearly got a massive arm, and he was also playing within himself. He can run. He's got everything you want in a modern day quarterback. So we're not going to see much of him this season. But I think ultimately you can see why the Packers have picked him. Turning to other teams, I look at Washington, and we all know what Fitzpatrick can do, but we also saw what Taylor Heineke did in the playoffs. So who's to say that Heineken cannot challenge Fitzpatrick for the starter job? Because ultimately we know that Fitzpatrick cannot put a full season together without doing something daft. I mean, he's brilliant to watch and he's great value from a PR perspective, and he lifts a locker room, but he's not a nailed-on starter. I would not be surprised if Heineke could end up being the starter there by the end of the season.
So, Washington's a team for me that I've got in that list because of Heineke, and I think that that's a really interesting backup. Even Kyle Allen isn't a total bum. Steven Montez I know nothing about, I'll be perfectly honest, but Kyle Allen's not absolutely atrocious. Therefore, you've got Fitzpatrick, Heineke, and Allen there, and I think that's a fairly robust set of quarterbacks. There's two teams that I'm going to throw into this as well, because I don't think they qualify for a controversy because there's not a clear QB1 for me at either of these. The Philadelphia Eagles, because you've got Hurts and Flacco. And actually, if Hurts can live up to some of his potential and play well, then between him and Flacco, that's some really good depth. Nick Mullins had an absolute, I don't even know. Bouffing is definitely the word for his preseason performance. It was stinking. But we know that Nick Mullins is capable of winning in the NFL. So, there's three quarterbacks in Philadelphia that can win games. The other one there that needs to be mentioned is, of course, the New Orleans Saints. And I think that you do have to talk about the Saints because between Hill and Winston, there are two very capable quarterbacks, and it's not a controversy because there's no clear number one, so there's no one's getting knocked.
It's very capable a stretch.
I think they're very capable, not necessarily of throwing the ball to one of their own wide receivers, but they're capable, and I think that's they're capable. And I think that both of them can win games, and whoever the Saints roll out week one, they will be in with a shout because that team's good enough to be in with a shout. They're not bad enough to immediately discount them. And therefore, I think that if you're looking at kind of quality and stability, I don't think there's a massive drop-off between either one of them. Maybe that's because they're just all terrible. But I just don't see it as being that face cliff going from a great quarterback to something utterly terrible that's going to ruin your season.
I've got an interesting team here in that. So if you're looking at the best quarterback rooms and not including the starting quarterback, then I think they've got a case to be the best. I'm not entirely convinced that either of their three quarterbacks could lead them in the playoffs this year, and that's New England. So Cam Newton, if he's your backup, I think you're pretty happy. Mac Jones, if he's your starter/quarterback of the future, I think you're probably thinking, there's a chance there. And if Brian Hoyer's your third-string quarterback, he's all right. He's been in the NFL for a while, got plenty of knowledge. It's a good quarterback room. Yeah. I just don't know that any of those guys are good enough to take you to the playoffs.
It's an average quarterback room, let's be honest, with a bit of unprovenness in the middle of there. You can't judge any rookie who's never set foot on the field in a competitive game, and you got to include Jordan Love in that category, even though he's not a rookie anymore. You could say this. The strongest quarterback room, if we're going on that regard, is arguably San Francisco because they've got Garoppolo, who was in a Super Bowl 2 years ago, and then they've got Trey Lance, who's just been picked with a number 3 pick, who's meant to be the future and this amazing 21st century machine. Yet we've never seen him on the field. I mean, there would be half a dozen franchises who would kill for one of those two to be their number one right now, I would think. So, penny for the thoughts of Shanahan. What do you do?
I think we'll cover the San Francisco 49ers in the last category here because I think that's the controversy waiting to happen, right? And I think that Trey Lance touchdown, ooh la la, that got me out my seat.
Let's not speak about the rest of the performance.
No,
focus on the touchdown.
Yeah, the touchdown was amazing.
And
The rest of it was passable. It
I'll
was
have Cameron
passable.
say ooh la la
Is
ever again.
CJ Beathard still there, Cameron?
No,
If you
CJ
rely on him.
CJ Beathard. No, after that we've got Josh Rosen and Nate Sudfeld. So it falls off a cliff. CJ Beathard actually is another team that might deserve a little bit of a mention for depth. Is the Jacksonville Jaguars. So you've got Trevor Lawrence, who of course is the hottest property #1 pick coming out. You've got Gardner Minshew, who I could watch play all day long. You've got CJ Beathard, who is, but fine, as a number 3. And then you've got Jake Luton, who I think showed flashes of some capability as well. There's talent in that quarterback room. So I think the Jags are in that conversation for overall good situation to be in. But guys, we need to pick 3. We've reamed off a bunch of names here. But we need to pick the best 3. Who are the best 3 quarterback rooms in the NFL?
I think we all agree the Raiders are at the top.
Yeah.
Or in the top amongst them.
Again, I think we need to consider teams that are going to compete, teams that have got a playoff chance, a Super Bowl chance. So
Let's go.
Do you look at
postseason chance
New
for the Super
England?
Bowl chance.
Do you look at New England and think, are they going to make a run?
Could they make the
Honestly,
playoffs?
they might have 3 half decent, serviceable quarterbacks. I can't see them winning that division.
No, but you don't need to win the division. Like there's 7 teams in each conference that make the playoffs now. They could
Scrape a wild card potentially.
Yeah,
they're not going to
but-
win the Super Bowl.
but that's
You're
what I mean,
talking about
like-
teams here that have got a chance.
they could make the playoffs with either of those 2 quarterbacks because they were borderline last year, and that was without an off season. I would have the Raiders #1.
Yeah.
I would
disagree.
have
I think the
But I mean-
Browns. The Browns.
yeah
in
the
at
Browns
number
would be
2.
in my top 3 as well.
And then I've got Washington.
Mm.
And that for me is Raiders, Cleveland, and Washington are the 3 that I think are just with enough talent that they're not all 6 out of 10s.
What
But-
about Buffalo?
Mitch Trubisky and Davis Webb.
The MVP himself. No, thank you.
The only one I thought was Miami, but to be honest, Reid Sinnett, I don't know enough about to comment on. Jacoby Brissett's not a bad backup to Tua. And I think that's a couple of decent players, but there's not a huge amount of names in that list at all. Just the 3 of them. So, and to be honest, the Steelers, we touched on them earlier. Big Ben, Mason Rudolph, Dwayne Haskins, but I think there's a lot of question marks there. I'm definitely happy to go Raiders and Browns. I would put Washington, but I'm open to any other submissions here.
I'd probably have the Saints
Instead of
if we're saying as number 3 instead of Washington.
okay.
If we're saying that the Raiders are #1, going from David Carr to Marcus Mariota, is Marcus Mariota definitely better than Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill? Don't know.
It's all much of a muchness, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's all
There you go.
average versus average.
I think the shout for the Patriots, I think they've got the depth. They might not have the stars, but if Cam Newton fires, they've got an experienced NFL quarterback. They've got the rookie who's going to be their supposed rookie sensation, and they've got a serviceable veteran at 3. So I'd have the Patriots in there.
Don't hate it.
Okay. There's actually a team we've not covered because I think it's possibly controversy. Do the Bears get a mention here? Between Andy Dalton, Nick Foles,
They're
and
in your
Justin
next
Fields.
category.
Are they the next category?
Next category.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. Okay, so we've got Raiders, they're in. Browns, they're in. We're between Washington, the Saints, and the Patriots. We've all pitched. Do you know what, Charles? You can have the casting vote there.
Just to stir the pot, I'm going to say the Saints because Jameis Winston is my fantasy quarterback. I want him to go off.
Funnily enough, I want them to go off as well, but that's the wonders of the English language. That same phrase can mean so many things.
I'd second the Saints.
So we weren't supposed to be doing quarterback controversies in this round, but there's one right there. Brilliant. Okay, right, let's move on to them nicely now. Biggest stories and quarterback controversies waiting to happen. This is the meaty stuff that we're all looking forward to, let's be honest, because the rest of that stuff's just like, yeah, you're bad, you're good. Right, where's the stories coming from?
This is my week 1 preseason take. I'm
Yep.
very excited for this.
Right. Gordon, lead us off.
The first week of preseason showed us that the Panthers and Colts probably shouldn't have traded for the quarterbacks they traded for, in the sense that both of those teams, but specifically the Colts, I think, are set up for everything but a quarterback for a couple of years. If they started Jacob Eason, he showed this week in preseason, he might actually be all right. He had a couple of really nice throws in there. Was PFF's highest graded quarterback for the week. It's preseason, so there's the caveat that comes along with that. But if he's terrible and he's your starting quarterback, you're probably picking in the top 5. Carolina, similar scenario. Traded for Sam Darnold, who for some utterly bizarre reason doesn't need preseason reps, despite the fact he's not been good in the NFL so far. And his most successful stint for the Jets was seeing ghosts and catching mono. PJ Walker from the XFL, he was XFL, not AAF, I think, looked half decent. And again, similar scenario. If he's terrible, you're probably picking in the top 5. And then you can draft a quarterback without having to spend much. Why spend what you spend on Carson Wentz, Sam Darnold? Carson Wentz's contract's like $20 million a year. You could have had another cheap quarterback next year if Jacob Eason was bad.
Well, the flip side to that on both accounts is Carson Wentz has a proven track record over the last year. Okay, he was garbage, but he also was borderline MVP candidate 2-3 years ago. So he has proved he can throw a ball. I think they overpaid for him. When you look at Darnold, was it, remind me what they paid for Darnold? Was it a third or a second? I can't remember. It certainly wasn't a first.
No, I think
is it not worth chucking a second or a third round pick just to get a quarterback? And then do you know what? If they are appalling and they do go into the top 5, then they can obviously select. But surely to goodness, you've got to keep selecting quarterbacks and giving them a shot, rather than just sort of sacrificing a season.
I think you're sacrificing a season though. Like Walker showed something in the XFL, and Jacob Eason was like a weird up and down quarterback in college. The Carson Wentz thing's really interesting because he was really good for that first part of that season, and he just steadily got worse and worse over time. It's not entirely different career trajectory from Cam Newton, who had an actual MVP season and then just quite steadily got worse and worse each year. So maybe it's not the Sam Darnold thing. I think is more excusable than the Wentz thing because the Wentz thing comes with like $20 million a year contracts, and
Wentz
I just don't think
they've also taken Wentz because, and this is the Frank Reich theory, of course, is that Frank Reich knows Wentz inside out and thinks that he can reconstruct him. So there's a plan there in that regard. So I understand why they made the move. It was a straightforward move for them to just slot somebody in who's going to stand there like Rivers did last year, not move around, and hopefully
that didn't work for them last year.
Well, it worked for them up to a point, but you get to the wild card round, you go out.
That's a lot. It's a lot of money though for that strategy. I think
they overpaid. I think Philadelphia got a good deal out of it, but ultimately in the NFL you can't build for next year or the year after. You've got to give your team a chance. That's why Detroit's selling the house for the next 2 years. What's the point as a Lions fan in turning up? At least the Colts will turn up.
The point for the Lions turning up for the last 20 years
ever. Exactly. Exactly. And that, if you're a fan and if you're a franchise that's got any kind of ambition, surely to goodness you want to be going in there thinking we've got a chance here. Okay, he's not the greatest quarterback in the league. Okay, he has had a knee injury. He was duff last year, but there are pieces there that they can put together. Darnold has not proved anything at all, but he's a number 2 pick. Now he's a number 2 pick because he's a Jamarcus Russell number 1, number 2 pick. I mean, who was the biggest bust of all time? No, he's not. There must be something there that they feel that they can work with. And he's clearly from their point of view, a better prospect than what they had left. I mean, they could have stuck with Teddy Bridgewater, but Teddy Bridgewater did nothing last year to prove that he was going to be, a team that was capable of taking Carolina far. They've got a whole new setup in Carolina. I can understand why they went for Darnold, and I think that they paid a fair enough price for it, because at the end of the day, if they are rubbish, if they finish in top 5, then as you said, that they can go back to the well again next year. I think you just have to keep taking your chances on it.
See, I agree. I just think that the chance to take was Eason and Walker.
So
Darnold and Carolina, I've got more sympathy for because I think you can at least look at him more and say, situation was terrible, things got bad in New York, and he needed a fresh start. It's not that far into his career. Wentz has proven that he's got progressively worse. And at that point, you're saying, it's just NFL coaches do this all the time. They look at situations and they say, I know better than what the likelihood of this scenario working out is. The likelihood of Carson Wentz working out and being better than Phillip Rivers was last year, it's not the most likely thing in the world. Him being serviceable and passable and then being a borderline wildcard team again like they were last year, sure, that there's a relatively reasonable chance that'll happen. But is Carson Wentz at what you're having to pay for him at $20 million a year, and if he gets you to the playoffs, you're giving him a first-round pick for him, is he enough to turn them into a Super Bowl contender? Probably not. And this is a team that's just paid Darius Leonard a lot of money at linebacker. They're going to pay Quentin Nelson a lot of money at guard. Those are positions that if you're chunking a lot of money into, you have to have a saving somewhere, and they don't have that saving at quarterback, really, because Wentz costs a decent amount. Now, he doesn't cost what Patrick Mahomes costs, but it's not a massive saving given the fact that he's not really going to elevate you, I don't think.
Mr. Mitchell, you look like you were coming in.
Yes, and you were pointing at the screen.
What's it
but I think
pointing for?
I'm in a different order of a quad box.
It's a valid point.
There's two things that spring to mind. One, our listeners should appreciate. We're recording this on Zoom. It's now coming close to 9 o'clock at night. Cameron sits in his front room and it gets darker and darker and darker. He looks like the host out the Tales of the Unexpected at the moment. It's brilliant. I must take a picture. I think it's interesting. I think there's two different situations. The Colts have a chance to win their division, and I think it's always worth the punt to win your division. I don't think Carolina are going anywhere near their division title. Therefore, I would question the Darnold signing if you had somebody that might have been serviceable. That said, I think it's worth what they've paid for him because he might be decent. And if he's decent, the Saints have got problems. Atlanta are going to have problems eventually because Matt Ryan's not going to go on, and the Buccaneers are going to lose Brady in the next couple of years. If Sam Darnold can go in there and establish himself in year one and year two, they might actually have a franchise quarterback on their hands. So I've actually got some sympathy for what they've done. I certainly think it's worth the risk. So it's complex. I think the Colts had to go for someone because they've got a chance of winning the division. We've mentioned what might happen to Tennessee if Tannehill goes down. The Jaguars could be anything this year. The Texans, well, they could be anything as well. So I think the division's there. And anytime that you can deliver your divisional title to your fans, that buys you as a general manager and the coach at least another season or two.
Yep, and just to wrap this up and further add that this is a complex issue, I agree a lot with the sentiments, but not with the statements. My take on this one is that the situation in Indianapolis is that, they've overpaid. I don't think they could have possibly ran with just Essen. I think they needed somebody, but they've gone high for a guy who has as much output, really, and as much great game time as Nick Foles, who, finished off the season that Vince started. So I think that, the Colts probably, they needed someone, but I don't think he was the right someone. Carolina, I think Darnold's worth the risk. But I think, for me, we're talking about controversies here. I think that this all brings it back to that. And PJ Walker is absolutely one of the quarterbacks that could knock the QB1 off his seat, because Sam Darnold is QB1 in Carolina, and no way PJ Walker's going in as QB1, but he could be by week 5 or 6. I think he's got a lot of upside, and therefore they would still need someone else. So I think Darnold's still serviceable in there, but I think PJ Walker and the Panthers are primed for QB controversy this season.
I think week 5 or 6 is a bit premature. I think he'll get a little bit longer than that, unless he absolutely crashes and burns. They clearly see Darnold as somebody that they can mold and maybe regenerate a bit. I think he'll get a little bit more time than that. I talked about at the top, the one I'm really interested in is Pittsburgh, because if Roethlisberger's arm has gone, you've got 3 complete and utter duds behind him. who are all equally capable of taking over. And you know what Pittsburgh do? They always make a run and always get to the playoffs. So who's to say that with all these turds of quarterbacks behind Roethlisberger that they still can't do a job?
One of the things I think that people underrate about the NFL, like when we focus on teams a lot of the time, is that like good organizations generally have this annoying habit of staying relatively good. Packers have not had many rough seasons recently. You know, they're always really, and again, having a quarterback definitely helps that, but teams like that, the Patriots, even after losing Brady last year, they didn't completely fall apart. They were still floating about the playoffs. You know, the Ravens, even when Joe Flacco wasn't playing particularly well, again, always in and around that playoff hunt. That's Pittsburgh. Like that's why it's hard to entirely buy into Cleveland at this point in time, because they've given us like a season. You kind of need to become one of those teams that, you know, can do that. And Pittsburgh consistently are in and around the playoffs. Even when Roethlisberger was poor last year, they were still there. They still got off to like a really hot start and then fell apart, but they were still good enough to make the playoffs. They could absolutely make the playoffs without Roethlisberger. Don't think they would be, you know, a threat to be the number one seed. Don't think they're a threat to win the Super Bowl, but it really wouldn't shock me if one of those guys winds up starting because Roethlisberger just can't get it done anymore.
Yeah. And I guess that's possibly why it wouldn't be a controversy, because it's a player who's reaching the end of his career and on the way out against guys that have clearly been brought in to take over from him at some point. If we're looking for controversies, you know, PJ Walker has not been brought in to knock Sam Darnold off his seat. Trey, and I'm going to put the 49ers into this conversation because different situation. Trey Lance has definitely been brought in to be the future number one, but I don't think there's ever been an intention to have him knock Jimmy Garoppolo off his seat early in the season, and I think that's one that could potentially happen as well if he gets enough game time and opportunity to show that he's worth the risk.
I don't really believe a word that comes out of San Francisco after they spent the entire offseason getting people to tell us they were taking Mac Jones. And then now they have Trey Lance. It's like, no, he's not going to start. He's not getting reps with the ones. Oh, no, he actually is getting reps with the ones.
It'd still be a controversy, though, to knock a quarterback on that contract off his seat, having not played last season.
Not when you've gone 3 overall. If he goes 3 overall and doesn't play all season, that's the controversy.
Yeah. And it means that Garoppolo's clearly bribing Shanahan with something, or there's all sorts of illicit goings on taking place that we don't know about.
And yeah, do you know what? I'm maybe looking at this the wrong way. Maybe the controversy isn't about Lance taking over Jimmy Garoppolo. It's Jimmy Garoppolo being number one all season long. And I guess Chicago's that same conversation. Maybe the conversation there is that Andy Dalton doesn't end up being QB2 and he runs the Bears to the playoffs this year. That would be a controversy.
What? Not a chance that's happening.
Well, that's exactly my point. The controversy.
Wait a minute. Do we have a potential burger bet here? I
am happy to lump burgers on the fact that Andy Dalton will not.
Andy Dalton or the Bears?
To a winning record.
Andy Dalton or the Bears, full stop.
The Bears are not going to the playoffs.
Okay, I'll take that. Burger bet. The Bears will.
The Bears
go
are
to
not
the
going. I will take burgers, chips, coleslaw, you name it, on the Bears. I'm quite happy to do that.
Burger bet. Bears are going to the.
The Bears are not going to the playoffs.
Yeah, fine. Okay, burger bet done.
No danger.
Second of the season. Second of the season.
Write it down.
Can we talk Bob Baggery for a minute?
Yes.
And the sheer Bob Baggery that is the franchise that they dare call the New Orleans Saints, who on their website, under their depth chart, list Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston in alphabetical order as first-choice quarterback.
Alphabetical by first name or surname?
That was my question.
I think, the common practice would be surname, obviously. So I'm looking at it right now. Quarterback, first team, Taysom Hill, Jameis Winston. Second team, Trevor Siemian. Third team, Ian Book. That's Bob Baggery from the Saints, as far as I'm concerned.
Keep the punters guessing, Paul.
Who's QB1? Both of them.
It's one of the most tiresome stories that's coming out, isn't it? Because you either it won't necessarily be determined by games. They'll know it in practice. He'll know who his starting quarterback is. I'm fairly certain of that. If you rely on pre-season to tell you the difference between Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston, I think there's something far wrong here. If he doesn't know what he's got, and I would suggest that you cannot bring in Jameis Winston if you were not intending necessarily to use him, because, Hill was in the building, so if Breeze went down, Hill was your future. So obviously there's doubts there, so he brings in Winston. I think Winston will be QB1, and it's going to make for a very uneasy opening week.
I'm just going to edit that so that you say an easy opening week, and then we can play it back when it all goes horribly wrong.
I've recorded it on mine as well, don't you worry. I'm going to be like these media organisations that stand next to the managers and hold a phone when they record the interview, just to make sure that
nothing's being misrepresented.
Yep.
If you're not careful, Paul's going to start charging you for his thoughts for the next podcast. You're going to have to pay a fee in order to get him on.
No, I'm a podcast. I get free access as long as I speak nicely of him. As long as I say all the things he wants me to say, then I get it for free.
$25,000 a year. That's what it'll take to get access.
So okay, we need to pick top 3 controversies. So, is the Panthers?
They're not going to get to the playoffs, so you can't count them. I think the Bears, purely for the fact that there's a burger now on the fact that they will go to the playoffs or not. They've got 3 potential starters there.
Okay, so Bears.
I think you got to pick the Bears.
49ers?
Yep, 49ers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, yeah.
And then is Washington the other one? If Tyler Heineke wins the job
controversial,
over
is it?
Fitzpatrick.
It's not. Was it controversial when Fitzpatrick got benched for Tua? Not really, because everyone knew it was going to happen.
Heineke is not Tua. Right? That's not the same.
No, it's not. But the thing is, if Heineke takes the job over Fitzpatrick, is it going to be controversial that he's not playing? No, because he's such a nice guy. He'll go, oh, well, that's fine. Okay.
He bitched him more when he lost the job to Tua last year. He's still crying about it.
Well,
he's quite right to do so as well. That was
shocking. That was shocking. Disgusting.
I think it's going to be more controversial if Taysom Hill's starting as quarterback. Let's be honest, or if Cam Newton is starting as quarterback in Week 17, because I don't think he will be.
I think we've missed one, and that is, does Gardner Minshew have any chance of taking out Trevor Lawrence?
No.
The reason I say that, hang on, Gordon. The reason I say that with a smile is it is one of the worst tropes that's come out of this pre-season. Is people are trying to big up Gardner Minshew as if he's got a chance to start.
They've been doing this for his whole career. Like, he was a fun story as a 6th round pick. He's better than a 6th round pick. Does anyone want Gardner Minshew as their starting quarterback? No.
Saints do. They would take him.
No, not even the Saints do. You've got at least some upside with Winston and Taysom Hill. What is the upside with Gardner Minshew? Oh, you might get the first overall pick and land Trevor Lawrence. Well, he came out this year, so tough.
What about Denver? Is that a controversy? Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater? It's not really, is it? Because
no, that's just pure ineptitude on their part for failing to get a good quarterback.
Is there a chance Jacoby Brissett? Jesus, this beer's going to my head. Jacoby Brissett. Is there a chance Jacoby Brissett gets the job over Tua, and Tua gets Fitzmagic this season?
No, Tua will start. I mean, the thing is, the thing in Denver is like, do you have red sauce or brown sauce on your rolling sausage? I mean, there's not a great deal of difference. It's personal preference. There's going to be no great difference as far as that's concerned. I think if you're looking for controversy, I mean, if Taysom Hill starts, I don't even think that's a great controversy in New Orleans. One of them's going to get pitched in, and it wouldn't surprise me if we see both of them in the same game in Week 1. So, and just used in different ways. So I don't think that's controversy. I think controversy would be Jordan Love starting in Week 1. That would be hysterical. But
now, controversy: Jordan Love ending the season for the Packers because Green Bay know that Aaron's leaving.
Only if they're missing the playoffs, and they're not going to miss the playoffs.
Yeah,
which they won't.
That doesn't count then. Okay, I'm fishing here. We're struggling. We've got the Bears and the 49ers. as the controversies. We need a third. Come on. What's the third most controversial story at the quarterback position? I need commitment here, boys.
Controversy will be if Deshaun Watson lines up under centre. There's your controversy.
Okay. Okay.
I think it's Carolina. I know it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but
yeah, I'm going to back you. I'm going to put Carolina in it because I think PJ Walker beating Darnold.
Would it not be the Raiders? Because the Raiders at least have a shot at the playoffs.
But Derek Carr's not getting benched though.
I don't know. I think Gruden would dearly love to do it if the situation arose. I mean, he would actually love to biff Derek Carr probably for the last 2 years if you were to delve into his deepest, darkest thoughts. The Raiders have got a chance of making the postseason. So, to me, they seem a more viable candidate than Carolina, who, let's be honest, they're not very good.
No, I know, but I think PJ Walker winning the job over Sam Darnold.
If you've just traded for a quarterback and then you don't play him after week 7, that is controversial.
Right, Panthers are in. It's done. It's done. There you go. We'll put all this together into a little graphic. We'll put it out later in the week. But there you go. There's your QB stories for the season ahead. Only took us 55 minutes.
The longest anyone's ever spent talking about backup quarterbacks.
That's the kind of podcast where we find the level of detail that our audience wants.
Yeah, and if you've made it this far, congratulations. So let's give them some podcast news, Paul. First of all, we put this out as a tweet. We're delighted that the Bonnie Sauce Company are once again sponsoring our Pick'em competition as we try and find the pick king or queen of Scotland for 2021. This is now, let me think about this first. Our 4th season of doing this. And thanks to the people at Bonnie Sauce Company, the prize for winning will be an NFL jersey of your choice. It will be an NFL Scotland hoodie. It will be entry to the NFL Scotland podcast fantasy league with all of us, with Stevie May, with Gary Miller, with Henry Purgos, with Ali Evans, and the current NFL Scotland fantasy champion, Scott Cooper. So you get entry into that for 2022, and you get some amazing Bonnie Sauce hot sauces to spread all over your game snacks. Just thought I'd leave that hanging there for a while to see if anyone wanted to jump in.
What a great read that was. That was tremendous. Well played. I'll come in and help you out here. I'm going to give you a controversial take. I actually prefer the Pick'em to fantasy football. How about that? I love the Pick'em. It's just great fun. It's easy to do. It's easy to play. It takes a couple of minutes every week. And just bang the things in there. I'll probably get a Saints jersey when I win it, but I'm more interested in getting loads of the hot sauce. Just magnificent stuff.
Yep, very, very good. And absolutely delighted to be working with Scottish companies. We've got a few signed up for this year. Bonnie Sauce coming back on board was job number 1. We've got another couple in the weeks ahead. We're going to be very excited to share that. The other one, Paul, is we are officially going back to the Golf Tavern for week 1.
Yeah, looking forward to that. We're not going to do too much. We'll probably do a podcast chat amongst the guys. I think what people are wanting, Cameron, is just an excuse to get back together as a group of NFL fans and have a chat and have a beer. As far as the NFL Scotland team is concerned, we'll all have a burger at your expense, which we're highly looking forward to. You finally get a chance to deliver. So an expensive night ahead for you, but it'll be great fun. I might even buy you a half pint. How about that?
Yeah, that sounds fair. Yeah, so week 1 back at the Golf Tavern. Tickets are very limited for this. We don't have as many as we normally do. What we are going to be doing is making those available to people who have attended our previous events first. So if you're listening to this and you've ever come along to one of our Edinburgh events, you're going to get access to buy tickets for this one first. We're going to give people a bit of time to do that, and if there's any left, then they will go on general sale. But we're capping the numbers for this one. We know that restrictions are lifting in Scotland. However, what we want to do is make sure that it's a pleasant experience for everybody. We want to make sure that it's not overly crammed. As people are adjusting to a new way of life, we just want everyone to enjoy it. And like you say, get back together, get a good crowd in the golf, a great beer, great food, multiple screens. We'll show the games, we'll show Red Zone, we'll have a chat, we'll all be there. Very much looking forward to it. Right, on to other talking points. Paul, you wanted to discuss Hard Knocks episode 1.
Yeah, just before we go to Hard Knocks episode 1, I'm looking forward to going to Florida next year where I'll be able to pick up my Tim Tebow Jaguars jersey from the discount rack because Tim Tebow has been cut by the Jacksonville Jaguars.
It's a sad day.
As a measure of his stardom, I mean, he all of the jerseys for the Jags went into the top 10 of sales right across the country with Tebow's number 85. So I'm telling you now, I'm coming back next year with a black Jacksonville Jaguars 85 jersey with Tebow on it because they're bound to be in the discount rack. Hard Knocks, anybody excited by Hard Knocks? I thought it was fairly average. I didn't think there was a great deal of narrative. You took to Dak Prescott for the way he talked about his brother, the way he talked about his injury. But apart from that, Jerry Jones tearing up because this is the place he wants to be. I'm not really into sort of billionaires having a little tear to themselves and getting emotional about things like that, when you can bugger off to your yacht and sail around during a pandemic. So I'm not really, I didn't really feel the love and the empathy. I actually quite like Jerry Jones. The Ezekiel Elliott trying to wrap a parcel, if there's a lower form of television available this year, I've yet to see it. That was really naff. I think they're struggling. I don't know whether teams, it'd be interesting to see what you guys think. I'm just wondering if teams are much more guarded now about Hard Knocks and they're trying to cut out anything that might actually look as if it's interesting.
It's all about control, though, because clubs, not just in the NFL, look across sport. Football's the easiest example. It's all about controlling the narrative, putting a positive image out. I mean, associations and clubs have been doing that for years now, but this paranoia that somebody's going to latch on to the perception that things are going awry or things are out of control means that it is completely sanitized, totally sanitized. And actually, it means that when something does happen, the media totally latch on it, the public totally latch on it, when actually it's probably not that big a deal in the first place. I mean, there is a lot to be said for them completely throwing the doors open. You saw with the Man City All or Nothing series, the whole thing was completely sanitized and eliminated all the risk factor. But you should be signing up to that with a view, right, we are going to open the doors and we are going to completely spread ourselves to the world, and this is going to be no holds barred. It just doesn't work like that anymore because of the amount of money that's at stake in terms of the product and the brand and the sponsorship. And it's just unfortunately the way that professional sport is. It shouldn't be like that, and someone should be brave enough to take the lead and say, you know what, you need to make more of an effort. But the NFL have got a product to protect.
Yeah, it feels contrived now for me, Hard Knocks. I think that they were given weird little nuggety stories. Jerry Jones, I don't know if there's something behind it, so I feel like I don't want to go too hard on criticise him for tearing up because there might be something that's happened that's making him emotional about where he is. If it's just straight about the fact that he's glad to be back at the football field and he's crying, then yeah, save me the tears, man.
I mean, I'd
be on his yacht. I want to be on his yacht.
Yeah, I'd cry tears of joy if I want to be yachting on the American football team.
But I just, it's not quite got going just yet. And I think that we'll give it another couple of weeks. But also, I don't know that there's that many characters in the Dallas Cowboys roster either, which is always part of the... Micah Parsons seems like he could be quite fun. But, yeah, I don't know. There's just not a lot of... Didn't seem like a lot of fun. Oh, I've stolen Dak's bike. Oh, the Japes. I
wondered who it was. I'm glad you've owned up to it at last. Yeah, I mean, and it really, between stealing Dak's bike, wrapping of the present, the unwrapping of the present. I mean, there wasn't for me anything in it that made me think, I'm really can't wait for episode 2. I've been to Dallas. I visited the stadium. They're a heck of an organization. There's no doubt about that. I've mentioned before on the podcast, their stadium tour is immense. The way they just let people wander and go on the field and all. There's all sorts of great things about them, but that struck me as sanitized, not particularly interesting. And if you're a producer on Hard Knocks, you're praying for something to happen because there certainly wasn't much in it.
Well, if you look at 3 years ago, they had the Cleveland Browns and Hugh Jackson imploding on screen. And then 2 years ago, they had the Antonio Brown shambles with the Raiders, which was not, it wasn't compelling viewing, but it would have been 5-star box office compared to what we saw last year with the two LA teams. And this is just, it's the slippery slope. Ultimately, you need characters.
Yep.
And television and entertainment, you need big characters, and you need big characters to fill the screen and to realize that they are part of a show. And the problem is a lot of professional sportsmen are wary of the media and guarded as soon as a light switches on, or as soon as someone switches a recording device on. They don't want to be seen to be, doing something to their image, ultimately, and that's what it is. And remember, the Dallas Cowboys is the biggest brand in world sport. So, heaven, hell, whoever ruins the image will be out on their ear. So the last thing you want to do is to be destroying the sainted image of the Cowboys, and ultimately it's just a case of, right, we've got to get through the next 4 weeks, lads. Just let's not make any cock-ups here.
So it'll be interesting to see where we go from here with the rest of Hard Knocks. Will you be watching in, guys, or will you now avoid it?
We've not really sold it, have we?
No.
I'll be watching it, Cameron, because I'm interested in it. I'll watch it. But I mean, Gordon made a good point. The one last year was dreadful when it actually could have been decent with not one but two teams to look at. It was fairly bland. And if Charles is right that they've gotten into the hands of the PR and media people, then as an idea, it's dead.
It's also like from a PR and media thing. The way social media is these days, it's not even like stuff gets picked up on. Is any mistake you made is a meme in 30 seconds. So everyone's very cautious. Even individuals now don't really want to make a fool of themselves anymore. No one really wants that mockingness. My take on watching it is the exact same as it was last week. I'll catch the highlights on Twitter. If anything's good, I'll maybe watch the whole thing.
It's fair. The one other thing we need to talk about before we wrap up for this week is the standoff between Jamal Adams and the Seahawks is over. Jamal Adams now the highest paid safety in the NFL. A 4-year extension, $70 million contract with $38 million guaranteed. It means that's a $17.5 million per year average, and puts him over $2 million more than the second highest safety, which is Justin Simmons at the Broncos. And Landon Collins is the only safety to receive more guaranteed money, which was $44.5 million, but that was on a 6-year deal. Worth that much money for a safety? Gordon, I'm going to ask you first.
So, I mean, first things first, it's not surprising that the player who the team paid 2 first-round picks for won the standoff, not the team who spent 2 first-round picks. We saw it happen with Houston and Laramie Tunsil. If you spend a huge amount of draft picks before you sign the player and don't have that agreement in place, you're paying through the nose or he's leaving as a free agent. And that's what they've had to do. I saw someone tweet this today and I don't disagree with it. And I've definitely been guilty of this in the past. There is like a habit now, and analytics definitely plays a part in this. Anytime a player who is not a quarterback signs a big contract, first thing so many people seem to do is rush out and go, "Oh, you spent too much on this player." Is it more than I would like to have spent on Jamal Adams? Probably. Is he one of the best safeties in the NFL? Yes. Can you move him around? Can he rush the passer? Is he good in coverage? Yes. You have to pay good players, unfortunately, or someone else is going to pay. If the Seahawks weren't willing to pay Jamal Adams this amount, someone else would have. So at that point, there is an element of you need to pay the market value.
Do safeties grow on trees, just like running backs?
So I think like an average safety, I think if you have an average safety, you don't need to overpay for that. But the truly special safeties like Derwin James, if you can stay healthy, Minkah Fitzpatrick in Pittsburgh, Jamal Adams in Seattle, those guys are rare, and guys that you can move around a lot and can do certain things. So at that point, I think you have to pay them.
Yeah, I mean, I look at, if you go back 10 years or so, you look at the